sort of wrapping my mind around. These are just
and look through that way. I mean, it's endless.
Oh my God, that's a cemetery right
That's
here.
what I mean.
Yes.
This is what I mean.
This parking lot is filled with like barricades and construction dudes and electric fans, and then wow.
I mean, this is totally representative of what is, you have real death, and then you have environmental death. It's like, I'm really honestly surprised that more people are not, that when people understand it, they don't just give up. Because it would be easy to just, because like, how do you fight this? But, I mean, from my perspective, we've come a long way.
Welcome to Building Local Power, the Data Centers Are Coming. I'm your host, Danny Kane. In this 6-part series, we're reporting to you directly from the front lines of a fight consuming countless communities across the United States. The question of data centers and where to build them, what kinds of resources they'll use, and who gets to make those decisions. These are not decisions in the abstract. The questions of where, when, and why to build data centers are questions that weigh heavily on everyday people's lives in numerous ways. We're here to tell that story and to search for some answers about how to do it right. It's worth saying off the bat that I am a proud AI skeptic. Of course, I'm aware that what we call AI refers to a broad range of technologies, some of which I used in the creation of this very podcast, namely things like automated transcriptions of interviews and spell check. But what has come to be known as generative AI is much more troubling to me. I'm an author, and I recently learned that one of my books, How to Resist Amazon and Why, was used to train Claude, Anthropic's AI interface, without consent from me or my publisher. Here's a technology that claims to be able to write, illustrate, design, and even think on its own, ostensibly replacing the labor of human writers and artists, using my human writing to develop skills that could eventually replace the work I'm so passionate about. Ethical questions about generative AI are worthwhile and important, but they're for another podcast. In the process of learning more about this technology, I found another compelling story, one with immediate and concrete local consequences. While I feel lost and powerless when thinking about what to do about generative AI in general, this other story is all about immediate local action. What's happening with data centers? The massively popular technology of generative AI requires staggering amounts of computational power, a need that's only exacerbated by AI companies' relentless pursuit of scale at all costs. The power needs of this technology are so vast that few Americans at this point have been spared the consequences of the race for resources to power the tech, whether they use or care about the technology at all. I have felt hopeless more times over the past few years than I really care to admit. The blatant, in-the-daylight rise of corporate power and political authoritarianism have left me feeling like there's nothing I can do to fight back. What better metaphor for the rise of corporate power than a physical manifestation of a corporation, a huge warehouse, with unprecedented thirst for electricity, water, land, and other resources. Talk about corporate power. Many people are facing structural manifestations of corporate power in multiple senses, mind you, in their own backyards. I include myself in that, of course. In late 2025, my colleague at the Institute for Local Self-Reliance, Ron Knox, published a galvanizing article in The Nation about the wave of populist anger directed at data center development. At the top of the article was a picture of a hulking, bland, apocalyptic-looking building called the CoLogix COL4 AI-Ready Data Center. The caption said COL4 was located on a 7-acre campus in Columbus, Ohio. I, too, am located in Columbus, Ohio. Consulting Google Maps, I discovered that COL4 was less than 2 miles from my house on the north side of the metro. It's across the street from my dentist. I drove up there to see it. It took me less than 5 minutes, less than the time it takes me to drive my son to his piano lessons in the same area. Standing on an abandoned sidewalk looking at this huge facility, I felt an urgent need to learn more. So I hit the road. I wanted to see the heart of Data Center Alley, a corner of Northern Virginia that's known as the worldwide capital of data centers. I wanted to learn what it was like when data center development grows unchecked. I wanted to see what big tech's dream for the American landscape looked like when these corporations were given a blank check. So I hopped in the car and pointed myself east. An early stop on my journey was the home of Greg Pirio. A longtime resident of Sterling, Virginia, Greg lives in the heart of Data Center Alley. He's heavily involved in neighborhood organizing efforts to hold a corporation called Vantage accountable for their data center's noise and the lies they told about it. He lives in a row of attached townhomes in a sleepy alcove of this outer ring Washington, D.C. suburb. I'd call it quiet, but it's not. Greg's modest townhome is in the literal shadow of a huge Vantage data center.
Well, our major impact is all the noise that it makes. This is the only data center in Loudoun County that has its own power plant. It's not connected to the grid. It has gas turbine engines that make a lot of noise. Today is relatively quiet, but some days at my doorstep, there are 70 decibels, which is in far excess of the county code for that. And then in addition to that, they have backup diesel generators that go on occasionally and make even more noise. Okay. It's almost like having a couple of jet planes going off all the time near your house. And the facility is only 150 yards from my front door.
The data center noise causes all kinds of headaches for Greg and his neighbors. Not only political nuisances, but actual health impacts.
People don't hang out in front of their house as much anymore. Neighbors have complained to me about headaches. One time I was taking care of my daughter's dog and I went for a walk and I got a headache from the noise. A quarter mile away, there's somebody who's put mattresses up against his bedroom window. And now he's bought plexiglass inside his house that he puts up, which costs him $250 per window. So at night he can sleep easier. Some of the neighbors with kids whose bedroom windows are near have complained their kids having a hard time to sleep. There's one woman who has come to our meeting who has had brain surgery, and she says this gives her terrible headaches.
Greg mentioned that people don't hang out outside anymore, which got me thinking about how that impacts the community feel of the neighborhood, not to mention the potential for organizing. Like, I'm thinking about, especially in terms of what you said about the power and importance of neighborhood organizing. If you have less people on their front porches, all of a sudden that work becomes more complicated and difficult, right? Because so much of the fabric of a neighborhood is just like running into each other outside.
Oh, absolutely.
And so, like, the data center is, like, in a way preventing neighbors from even meeting or talking to each other.
Right. And then the sound blows, there are people who live half a mile away who have showing up to meetings because it's hard to predict how the sound flows. That area is predominantly Hispanic. And now we have Hispanics, many of them whom are recent immigrants or children of recent immigrants. And now with all the anti-immigrant policies of the federal government, it's hard to get them to go to meetings, and they're fearful. They're fearful. That's an important dynamic that we have to solve too.
Yeah, that's the government decisions limiting community engagement on several levels, because you've got the federal immigration policies and then you've got the local people building the data center. When I asked Greg about how this loud data center ended up in his front yard in the first place, he told me about a planning process that he claims was full of misinformation. Based on what he heard, he says the data center was never supposed to be this loud.
And we're asking for our county supervisor, Karan Sains, and the at-large Phyllis Randall to have a meeting with us with representatives of Vantage, because we're hearing also that Vantage says that they were going to be connected now within 3 years to the grid, but we don't trust them at all. I reached out to my state senator, and his office tried to find out from Dominion Energy when that would occur. And They said, oh, we can't discuss that because it's private between Dominion Energy, which is the electrical supplier here, and with our client, Vantage. They didn't tell us that they were going to have a power plant on site. They showed us a building that was much smaller and that there were only diesel engines on the far side of it. Within a few months, they got approved a much bigger one, and it has diesel engines on both sides and has a power plant. It feels like bait and switch.
This will come up again and again in our investigation. The planning processes for these data centers is often opaque and designed to exclude the public. Shell companies, unpublicized meetings, corporate misstatements, and misleading claims are all common elements of people's stories about fighting data centers. I wonder if this will become even more common as opposition to data center projects grows across the country. To Greg, this is all even more reason to get it right.
I grew up in Southern California when we regularly had smog alerts. I lived in a town that had a steel mill. I know people who die from air pollution, who had asthma and all that sort of thing. The thing about data centers sounds all great, all this stuff that can be done, but this is almost like a second industrial revolution. Mm-hmm. And so we really need to be able to regulate how this happens and make sure that human values are in place.
The view from Greg Pirio's front stoop is dominated by that Vantage data center. Even on a quiet day, there was a deep industrial hum in the air. When I was walking around out there in that corner of Sterling, it was always clear that I was very close to massive and powerful industrial facilities. It felt like standing near an airport. I knew there were many places like this in Loudoun County, Virginia, which has fast gained a reputation for being the data center capital of the world. A combination of factors including proximity to Washington, D.C., high-capacity electric grid infrastructure, and local politicians in deep thrall of big tech and the data industry have led to a huge change in the landscape of Loudoun County. What was once semi-rural, far-flung suburbs of the nation's capital have become heavily developed industrial land. The Building Local Power team wanted to see it firsthand, so we enlisted the help of local activist Elena Schlossberg.
So I have been on many an adventure in Data Center Alley. Okay. So you'll get the flavor of it.
Elena is ready to talk data centers to whoever will listen. Deeply passionate about the issue, she founded the advocacy group Coalition to Protect Prince William County in 2014, aiming to prevent Loudoun County's data center boom from spreading to adjacent rural Prince William. In the decade plus since, Elena has become central to the data center fight in Northern Virginia. Along with my producers Ilana Nevins and Reggie Rucker, I met Elena on a breezy day in January 2026 in an Aldi parking lot in Haymarket, Virginia. We climbed into her Ford Explorer and off we went for the Elena Schlossberg tour of Data Center Alley.
When my husband and I bought our property in 2000, none of this was here. There was a gas station and a McDonald's, and that was it. This all appeared years later. So it was much more rural, which is why we bought here. So Prince William County serves as a critical resource for a drinking water supply for about 1 million people in Fairfax, Eastern Prince William, Alexandria. And that's because Prince William County is very swampy, which I think is why it sort of got a reputation of being less than, maybe, because it started out, nobody wanted to live here.
Our first stop on the tour was an Amazon Web Services facility and its associated electric infrastructure, a campus that galvanized an early part of Elena's activism and organizing.
What we are about to drive by is the beginning of how we discovered the kind of power that data centers require. To your left is a substation. And that substation was built for an Amazon campus, which was hidden from the community, the application. And you see that still today, that NDAs, non-disclosure agreements, are utilized by your planning staff, by local government, by state government, and it's a way for the data centers to stay hidden. This is the Amazon Web Services campus that triggered a massive extension cord. That's what we called it, because that's what it was. And you see how close these homes are to this AWS campus.
It's hard to explain to you, listener, just how much these buildings dominate the surrounding areas. Standing on the sidewalk in front of people's homes, the only way to describe this Amazon complex was that it was looming over us. And it's not even one of the big ones. These older data centers could be built like this because the tech companies took advantage of how unprecedented the technology was, and the fact that municipalities and their residents weren't ready to define or contain them.
Data centers had no definition, so they were the same as like a Best Buy computer store. So they could build anywhere basically with little to no oversight.
Of course, it's now widely known that data centers require exponentially more resources than a Best Buy, and they're only getting bigger. The current generation of data centers are much, much larger than this already huge AWS facility, and they're sprouting up everywhere across Data Center Alley. Later in our tour, Elena drove us by one of those huge construction sites, all cranes and workers and buzzing activity. The site already had patriotic decorations.
Okay, so I want you to take a look. See that American flag?
Yeah.
Okay, because data centers are patriotic. And what you will see when we go through Data Center Alley, this is the antithesis of democracy, what we are experiencing. Just want to say that. And when we go through Data Center Alley, now they all have them.
Later in the drive, Reggie brought up a question about jobs. The question is more than relevant. Data center projects often pull massive tax breaks from local governments, ostensibly based on the promise that these projects create jobs.
Say more about what that looks like and why it's a problem. There are a lot of people that go, oh, well, isn't there something about the age of industry that was good for us?
I don't know. Look at Pennsylvania and look at the industrial era of the steel mills. How did that work out? These are robber barons on steroids, like hold my beer. 20th century robber barons. Let me show you how you absorb entire public utilities, local government, state government, federal government. So once you understand what this industry is actually doing, then you cannot unsee it. It's like coming out of the matrix. So the jobs. What jobs? Construction jobs? I've been in land use almost 25 years. The jobs that economic development talked about historically were the jobs on site. Like Target will provide on site hundreds of jobs. You look in a data center for such massive buildings, why are the parking lots so small? Well, they're all computerized. The people that are in the data centers are just, watching the computers, making sure that the air conditioning is correct, that the humidity is correct, that the servers are operating. So maybe a campus of 500,000 for each building might have, like that campus over in Haymarket. That's a small campus. Maybe each building has 10 workers. They don't bring jobs. And construction jobs are temporary jobs. You'll see when we get into Data Center Alley, buses that'll literally say construction. They bring their teams with them. They have got it down to a science. They build the walls on site or they bring them. They're all prefabricated. That's the danger of also putting all your eggs in this one basket. Is what happens when this industry changes. How do you repurpose these behemoth buildings so they're not the jobs? And what you are hearing about now are all these college graduates who are struggling to get jobs. They are not bringing the jobs. People are losing jobs.
Data centers are well known for their power needs. These huge and powerful computers not only use a lot of electricity themselves, they require constant cooling in order to function. If power ever goes off, the machines overheat and the whole thing shuts down. I'll pause right here to share a thought. The whole dialogue around data centers and electricity hinges on the idea that they can never, ever shut down. If you ask big tech companies, it's absolutely verboten for these to turn off, ever. I feel like I don't hear the same urgency around power needs for, say, hospitals. But is it really more important for ChatGPT to have more reliable electricity than ventilators? The amount of electricity needed is truly wild. Later in this series, we'll talk about Memphis, where Elon Musk is planning the world's largest data center. The planned facility will use 2 gigawatts of power. That's enough to power 1.5 million homes. That's enough to power all the households in the city of Memphis almost 6 times over. The consequences of hyperscale data center power demands are enormous. One such consequence is that the electric grid in Loudoun County is oversubscribed, and any added capacity is already claimed for years to come. That means data centers and the corporations that build them have to get creative, much to the detriment of the communities these data centers are in.
So we're going to drive by a Vantage campus that doesn't want to wait for power, because now it's a 7-year wait to get connected to the grid. And so what data centers are doing is they're creating these like bridges of microgrids using gas turbines, which are akin to a jet engine. Imagine living next to that. And so, okay, maybe you don't care. Maybe you're willing to sacrifice somebody else's quality of life because it doesn't affect you personally. But you know what? When the utility bills are doubling and tripling, maybe then you'll care.
The data center in Greg Perio's front yard didn't want to wait for grid power, and that's why its generators are noisy enough to give Greg and his neighbors chronic headaches. It's worth noting why exactly data centers need so much power. The internet runs on data centers, of course, and has done so for years. But new AI technology requires exponentially more computing capacity, often referred to as simply compute. And the need for ever more compute has led to the invention of new data centers called hyperscalers. Why the demand for all this compute? A few of the biggest AI companies, Anthropic, OpenAI, Google, and the like, are currently in an arms race to build the most powerful large language model AI systems. These companies are perhaps better known by their products. OpenAI makes ChatGPT, Anthropic runs Claude, and Google has incorporated Gemini into basically all of its products. At least for now, these companies have decided that the best way to build a more powerful model is simply to build bigger models. LLMs are powered by huge data sets that are analyzed for patterns, and outputs like Claude or ChatGPT are based on that pattern analysis. The bigger the data sets, the more powerful the model. So the companies need more and more computing power to handle ever larger data sets. Not only are the data sets larger, they're also sloppier. According to Karen Howe's definitive book, Empire of AI, earlier AI datasets, like the one Anthropic built in part by stealing my book, were focused on curated, high-quality data. As the AI scale race heated up, the luxury of curating data disappeared and AI models basically ate the whole internet. According to Howe, OpenAI built ChatGPT on articles and websites that had been shared on Reddit and received at least 3 upvotes on the platform. By the time ChatGPT 4 rolled around, data needs were so much higher that OpenAI gobbled up whatever they could find on the internet, scraping links shared on Twitter, transcribing YouTube videos, and cobbling together a long tail of other content, including from niche blogs, existing data dumps, and a text storage site called Pastebin. That's how you get issues like Elon Musk's Grok spitting out simulated child pornography. Some of the biggest AI companies no longer care about the quality of data they feed their models. Motivating these corporations even more than simple market share is the fact that each wants to get to general artificial intelligence first. That's a tricky term to define, but if you ask them, it's the endpoint of AI, a self-aware, truly intelligent machine. Each company thinks they're the only ones that can handle AGI responsibly. Each company thinks all the other companies will use AGI for nefarious means. And so they're each desperate to scale up until they're the ones that reach whatever AGI means. That's how we get to a place where these companies can't build data centers fast enough. That's how we get to a place where there's not enough electricity in the world to power this effort. That's how you get to a single industry completely remaking the landscape of Northern Virginia. That's how you get to what we saw as we dramatically climbed a Virginia highway off-ramp into a landscape I can only describe as apocalyptic.
Okay, now we are entering, you want to get your cameras out. We're going into the belly of the beast. We are going into Data Center Alley, where everything you will see is data centers. So when you go over this overpass, everything in front of you is data centers, as far as the eye can see. And this is 26 million square feet of data center development. And this is all joking aside, a mental health crisis for people that are looking at this and thinking about their one investment and terrified that this is what is in front of them. Oh, and the noise, the constant noise. It's awful, the construction of data center development. It's
Everything
like
is just covered in dust.
Yes.
These cars are covered in orange
Yes.
dust.
Like post 9/11, like the ash.
This is like
the
apocalyptic. So these are like getting to 2 and 3 stories. Because don't forget, a data center story is 37 feet tall. So when they say, oh, we're only 1 story, it's not really 1 story.
Every bit of the landscape here is shaped by the data center boom, including cemeteries. After circling around a data center alley for a few deeply unsettling miles, Elena steers us towards Tippett's Hill Cemetery.
When we talk about impacts, it goes from the beginning of when people get married. These churches in Old Town Manassas have an Amazon campus behind them, and it is awful. And then all the way to death. Nothing is sacred. I just lost my mom in January. I say just, it feels like just. Like it will always feel like just. In January of 2023, and she's buried not far from me. This beautiful cemetery that is surrounded by 2 conservation easements. The second one is just recent. But I picked it because I knew there would be no data centers and that she would love it. And I tell you, not for everybody, but for me, and I'm sure other people, when they go to visit someone that they really loved, like, it's a sacred moment. It really is. And you'll see the best of the worst and then the worst of the worst. So Tippett's Hill is the best of the worst. It is a historical African-American cemetery, but it also is still active in that there are still burials that occur there. People still bring flowers. And so that is the part of the Vantage Data Center campus. And they've put up a obelisk. They kept a buffer around it. So it's the best of the worst. Because when we get into Gainesville, you'll see how atrocious it can be.
This brings up a question for me. Big tech companies will often toss some relatively small benefit towards the communities that they're building in, like rehabbing a public park, or like Vantage building an obelisk in a parking lot at Tippett's Hill Cemetery. I ask Elena what her take on these deal sweeteners is.
Vantage, I think, understood. Definitely the industry is very conscious of pretending to look like they care. We'll give you a park. We'll buy you computers for your kids. It's, we're going to pollute their air. And ChatGPT may want, convince them to, jump off a 2nd-story window. But we're going to give you some tablets. So, there's definitely an effort to do that. So Vantage, and it's actually for them, it's like cheap PR. They put up an obelisk and then they keep some trees. It's like when you hear the data center industry talk about, we pay our electricity, we pay our fair share. Well, like, do you pay your electric bills? I pay my electric bills. I don't expect an award or a prize. And I don't make anybody else pay for it.
Even though Tippett's Hill represents, allegedly, the best-case scenario for data centers encroaching on sacred ground, with Vantage's minor upgrades to the site, it's still shocking to see a small historic cemetery in the middle of, well, all that. Oh my God, that's a cemetery right
That's
here.
what I mean.
Yes.
This is what I mean.
This parking lot is filled with like barricades and construction dudes and electric fans, and then wow.
Who runs the cemetery, and like what was their reaction to?
I think this was the best they could.
Got it.
And trust me, like, you still see some trees around. I mean, but look at all the vines, like they haven't planted new. It's just full of brush, and like these trees are dying. I mean, this is totally representative of, you have real death and then you have environmental death. It's Like, I'm really honestly surprised that more people are not, that when people understand it, they don't just give up. Because, like, how do you fight this? From my perspective, we've come a long way. You guys are here, right? And that's what I think. And that's why I keep doing the tours, because at some point, before it's too late.
Of course, maybe out of the barn, like here on this one, but to let this be a cautionary tale, and like don't let your community be next, you know, like
The cumulative impacts that all of this is having on everyone, whether you live next to it or not, we're all going to feel it one way or another. And of course, you know, people who were enslaved do not have actual markers. You'll see very specific stones throughout here that are where people were buried.
Thinking about the gross disrespect, but like, rest in peace. Like, I mean, no, you don't get that. You will get no peace.
No. There's no peace for the living. There's no peace for the dead.
Yeah.
Standing in that bizarre and frankly disturbing cemetery, it's easy to feel overwhelmed. But as widespread as data center construction is, spreading in parallel is resistance to AI corporations' attempts to transform the American landscape. There's some evidence that this resistance has surprised people with its strength and spread.
They miscalculated. They underestimated the level of anger that the community was feeling, watching their entire future be industrialized.
The anger against the spread of data centers has coalesced into a wave of community organizing around the issue. Elena makes an interesting point in saying that the coalitions forming around data centers are broad and effective because the issue is so new that mainstream partisan talking points have yet to form, allowing people to make up their own minds.
There was already a foundation for people to align on this issue. And so that has been the superpower. I was in a meeting last year with a group that was definitely progressive. And they were just now coming to this issue. And one of them said, you know, it's great because nobody's party has told them what to think. And I was like, exactly. And that's where the data center industry missed the boat. They just miscalculated. Imagine the wealthiest corporation in the world. Imagine they get to utilize your public utility to take your property. It is a feeling that is hard to describe. It makes people really, really, really pissed off. Because we work really hard, whether you own 1/4 of an acre, whether you own 1/8 of an acre, whether you own 10 acres, it's yours. You worked hard for it. The property we bought was overgrown with brush and ivy, and you couldn't even walk through it. My husband rehabilitated that property tree by tree by tree. It took him over 5 years. Allergic to poison ivy. So he'd cut a vine, and then he'd come back, bought this 50-year-old tractor. He labored. And we're supposed to give that up for a transmission line? Oh, no. Let me just put on the old Rambo makeup. Like, I'm there with him. And I'm like a peacenik, okay? But, I mean, we worked really hard. Nobody built that house. We built it. Me, pregnant, was on top of, like the second story. I mean, like, my husband left for 4 months after 9/11 to live in a tent and had an 8-week-old baby. He came back to that house and it was done. I had a bed in the living room. People are connected to their homes. This isn't just a house, and people are fighting for it. Whether you live in a townhome and the transmission line's going to back up so that you can almost hang your laundry line, or you're on 10 acres or more. It's everywhere in between. And then you have to pay for the transmission line? I mean, come on. Nobody should be okay with that. And then add in the diesel generators that are going to be kicking on. All of it is so wrong. And that's what people are fighting.
The fact that this is all happening in Virginia brings up striking layers of meaning and history. People have battled over this land since the United States were just an idea. There's the battle of colonists stealing the land from indigenous people. There's the battle over slavery and African Americans' human rights. Standing in Tippet Hill with its unmarked graves for enslaved people, it's impossible not to think about the Civil War battlefields a few short miles away. The irony only stacks from there. In the 1990s, in Haymarket, Disney was planning a Civil War-themed amusement park called, get this, Disney's America. Now, some folks are working to build data centers on that land. In Northern Virginia, not even history is safe from corporate power. It's as if tech companies are trying to steal land that was already stolen. American flags hang from data center construction sites. The same story has been playing out for 250 years. But remember, the Boston Tea Party was an anti-monopoly protest. American history has countless examples of land theft and corporate violence, yes, but it also has countless examples of localized uprisings against that corporate power. And those local uprisings can turn national. Just ask Greg Pirio with the data center in his front yard. Do you see this kind of hyper-local neighborhood organizing as a step in that direction? Is that the answer of how to start?
Oh, absolutely. I think what I'm discovering in this whole process is people don't know how to do this. Like in organizing the community, it's like taking baby steps. They haven't been involved in the community and in government in this way. Mm-hmm. So getting them out there and finding their voice is very important. It doesn't happen overnight, but there is a process of taking steps. What we're trying to do is this petition and all this, make progress, praise those who are getting engaged, taking a stand, and encourage them to encourage their neighbors and all this. For me, it's like a revitalization of democracy at the local level. That is really key because in the United States, we've lost so much of that over the years. And especially with neoliberal ideology that the marketplace will solve everything, we're actually at a place where it doesn't. And so who's going to solve the problems is a government responsive to the people. I'm that kind of person who says that every crisis is an opportunity. And so it's up to us to find that and to find our agency.
So what's the opportunity in this crisis?
Well, I think it is a revitalization of our democracy. It's a lot of work, but it has to be done. I've just seen throughout my lifetime people standing up about the Vietnam War, ending that, apartheid in South Africa. I mean, civil rights movement. I'm old enough to have gone through that, and I see, the kinds of positive changes that we can bring.
What do you say to someone who is like, this isn't Vietnam, this is a bunch of data centers in one county in Virginia? How is this approach being equal importance with those historical movements and events?
Let me quote Martin Luther King. Martin Luther King was all about creating a beloved community. Mm-hmm. And that's a community where people look out for each other, that they're involved in politics for the greater common good. That's done through people getting involved in community life and in politics and making alliances and moving forward. That's history, and that's how we move forward. What choice do we have? This is where we can act.
Elena takes the same long view that this moment is historic, and to her, history will judge the local fighters as the heroes, not the tech billionaires.
I mean, really, the real heroes of this entire saga that will be written one day are the citizens. Just regular, everyday people who decided that something didn't seem right.
While Greg and Elena make fragile progress in the heart of Data Center Alley, lots of people are looking toward Loudoun County as an example. But the question is, an example of what? Some people see Loudoun County as an example of the power of local organizing. Some see it as a worst-case scenario, a cautionary tale. Others, however, view it as an example of much-needed new revenue for cash-strapped local governments. In episode 2 of The Data Centers Are Coming, we'll head to a quiet corner of West Virginia known for its natural beauty and friendly small-town life. Who will win? The people who want to preserve the region's unique character, or the developers and politicians who see the data center boom as a financial boon to one of the country's poorest states?
The revenue that would be potentially available through these microgrid and data center processes is huge, and it dwarfs the existing budget that the county has right now. So it would be a tremendous improvement in our financial situation.
Stay tuned to hear about my time in Tucker County, West Virginia, an unlikely yet feisty front in the data center wars. Building Local Power, The Data Centers Are Coming is a project of the Institute for Local Self-Reliance. This episode was produced by Reggie Rucker and Alana Nevins. It was written by me, Danny Kane, based on my travels to the region in January 2026. Many thanks to Greg Pirio and Elena Schlossberg for their contributions. If you like what you heard, make sure to subscribe to Building Local Power wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you for listening, and see you next time.